I've actually found myself as I moved a little further and further away from like straight up design, what I would call like straight up design work, into more systems thinking, leadership. It's really easy to forget when you're not around a bunch of other designers all the time that not everybody thinks like that. So remember that that is a very valuable framing to keep. Like, why are we doing this? What is the problem we're trying to solve?
Welcome to the Technical Difficulties Podcast. I'm Liz Gerber and a design professor at Northwestern.
And I'm Lauren Lynn, and I'm a student who has also worked in the design industry. Each week, we speak with women leaders in design and technology.
Welcome back to the Technical Difficulties Podcast, where we celebrate the careers of amazing female designers and technologists. What happens when design and technology meets purpose at scale? We're thrilled to be joined by Amy Guterman, the force behind Salesforce AI for Impact Accelerator. From climate justice to education, Amy is helping organizations take bold risks with the support of strategic funding, donated tech, and pro bono expertise. With a background in innovation consulting and human-centered design, she's built a career around empowering others to drive meaningful change. Her work has been spotlighted by Forbes, Fast Company, and Wired, and recognized by the Gates Foundation and the White House. Join us as Amy shares her journey, her values, and her vision for how AI and design can shape a more just and sustainable future. We can't wait to hear from you, Amy. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
We're thrilled to have you here. I'm going to start with a warm-up question we ask everybody, which is, what is your favorite way to start the morning?
Oh, that is such a good question. My favorite way to start the morning, but often not the way it starts this morning, is a slow, leisurely wake up with a nice hot cup of coffee. Maybe then moving to the porch or the patio for some sunshine, and then getting going. Although the reality of it is I have a 4-year-old, and so it's often Mommy, time to get up.
You're not
the
alone.
Actual morning.
You're not alone, and I love your response. Favorite and actual are often different. Okay, next warm-up question is, and interpret as you like. What is your favorite creativity tool?
Ooh, I think a good pen. I used to do a lot of illustration. I don't do as much as I'd like anymore, but we used to have, and I love drawing with rapidograph pens that a lot of architects use them. They have refillable ink inserts. You can get all different like widths and sizes and super fine point. And a good fine point pen just makes everything come out nicely, I think.
Great. That's awesome. Is there a particular kind of paper you like, or are you paper agnostic?
I'm more paper agnostic. I mean, a good Moleskine notebook or a Muji notebook is definitely my fave. But
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
more
Good.
than pen.
Okay. Or a particular tip? Do you have a...
Yeah, I like the point. I think it's a 0.05
Okay.
one or 0.1, like still
Okay.
pretty small tip.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you. Okay. Now we'll start on your career. Thank you. So first question is, how did you get started in design? Did you have moments of like, I'm a designer, or was it only in retrospect?
Yeah, such a great question. I mean, I think I've always been a maker. In 6th grade, for example, I sold beaded necklaces to my friends on the playground. In high school, I started a mini fashion brand called Ami Raquel.
Wait, what was it called? Say one more time.
It was called Ami Raquel, which is my Hebrew name.
Oh, that's awesome.
I had little labels printed and everything.
Okay,
Did
what
a
was
fashion
your
shoot.
favorite piece? You did a fashion shoot? Okay, tell me
Yeah, I
about
had
that.
my friend model for me. She was
love it.
tall and gorgeous, and I was like, "Great, you can be my model."
What were your pieces? What was a standard piece?
We did these little upcycled thrift store T-shirts with rhinestones. It was like that back in the days of bedazzling was really hot. Like everyone had phones that would be bedazzled.
Oh yeah.
So I would bedazzle and like recut and sew these old t-shirts that I would find at a Goodwill, and then sell them to my friends and anybody that would want to buy them. And I just loved making something that other people took joy in and got excited about. And so that is, I think, how I got started in design. But the real turning point for me where I sort of realized the role that could play in my life was in college. I went to school for visual communication at Washington University in St. Louis. And then I spent my senior year working on a thesis around the US prison system. And that's when it just, I know,
Wow.
it's a very heavy topic. It all clicked for me then. I was like, design is so much more than making something pretty or marketable, but like really you can bring a lot of clarity with these tools to make
Oh.
something that's highly complex, highly
Yeah.
sensitive, better for people. And every part of that experience is all designed.
What was your
And so,
project? Can you
yeah.
share what your project was?
Yeah, it was to design an informational book. That was the assignment we were all given. It could be on any topic we wanted, but it had to help make that topic clearer, more compelling, more understandable through design. And at the time, it was visual communication. So this was like really right up that alley. But then, from there, I started realizing design is so much more than just the visual communication of it. It's every touch point, every experience, every way you engage with somebody. All of those can be moments that you're designing.
Wow. That's fascinating. And so I'm already starting to see the threat of social impact. I mean, even in high school, you were working on upcycled clothing, and then you start to work with the prison system. And then one of your first jobs, my understanding is you worked in developing rural health facilities in all sorts of countries, very diverse countries. Is that correct? Can you speak to how that experience informed your identity as a designer as well?
Sure. Yeah, that was earlier in my career. Had a really amazing opportunity to work with the Gates Foundation to help redesign paper-based health information systems in rural countries. We were working in a few different countries in Africa as well as in Southeast Asia, doing interviews and co-design work, shadowing, prototyping out in some of the most rural facilities to understand how do the paper artifacts get redesigned in a time, this was a while ago. So yes, digital and cell phones were, becoming more and more prevalent, but still the foundation felt that we were many, many years off before they were completely pervasive as tools across the most rural parts of the world. And so really understanding and working with with health workers to understand like how are you using these tools in your day-to-day? What are the challenges? And we just saw some amazing shortcuts. And I think that, when I think about the role of the designer as sort of understanding where and how processes get done today, you can often see where there's challenges or friction points by the shortcuts that people are taking.
Yeah.
So we saw things like people were making little side notes of tallies around how many malaria tests that they had given that day. And then we saw things like how they were like carting around in 100-degree heat, these like ledgers that were the size when you open them up of 2 11 by 17s opened all the way up. So like this big and this wide. And they had to take those out into the field and get on a bicycle to go run their vaccination campaigns. And so all of these tools were not working for the people that were using them. And so we were able to work with them to then understand, like, what do you need to be part of the system? And how can we take it from the information that you are trying to gather into helping you actually make decisions around your patient care?
Yeah. So what was an example of a solution that you designed? If you can share one?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things I'll mention, the tallies. So we would notice people like keeping track of how many of something that they would do every day, how many people they would see, how many malaria tests they would see. And they would always have like a little separate like note for it. And we were like, what is that? And like, well, at the end of the month, we all spend a week going to like the central facility and we have to count up by hand how many times we did one of these things, because we need to report that data up to all the various funders and the public health system so that they can have a record of how many malaria tests went out in that specific region. And so if we did it in the way that we capture the data in our catalogs, it's nigh impossible to go back and get that information. It's a paper-based. So we keep these little shorthand so that we can tally it more easily later. So we don't have to spend the full week counting these up, but we can spend maybe an hour verifying our collection of data. And so we ended up, when we were designing that tool as an example, we created a little like shorthand off to the side where they would actually like do the tick. So then when they, at the end of the day, as they were flipping the pages, they could just sort of like quickly capture all of those little ticks. The really small example in that one, we had some others where in the home-based record, for example, which was owned by the family, and it was their sort of like one central point of care for all their vaccination information about the child, which has to happen in a certain order and specificity in order for it to be fully vaccinated. We looked at other things around like how do we sort of like filter. We had a little like sleeve at the pocket. How do we filter the information and show just the information that is most critical for the parent to know on when to go back? Because that's the only information they need to know. How can we help them understand that piece of clarity and reduce some of the noise or complexity around these documents for them? But then for the health worker, have the rest of the information available to them to be able to take care of that child.
Great. I love your articulation of just the how small changes can make a big impact. I also, you're telling that story is reminding me of my observation of a very sophisticated hospital observing a nurse with a very sophisticated handheld medical device where she was to enter in different information of a patient, but instead she had a Post-it note on top where she was writing the numbers down. And I thought this was fascinating. And, she had all the technology around her. And I later asked her, I said, why are you writing the numbers down on a Post-it note and putting it rather than directly into the technology? And she said the interface was too complicated and she wanted to spend all her time facing the patient rather than, fully fiddling with the interface. And it was a great example of, here she is surrounded by technology and yet the interface is not designed to prioritize the attention she wants to give to the patient.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that because I often thought, at that time, I'm like, wow, I had at the same time also been working on patient health record redesign in the US and how our systems and our EMR works. And I was like, the challenges facing some of the paper systems in rural places of the entire world are not all that different from the challenges we're facing in our own electronic medical systems. Like siloed data, you can't get out, hard to access, hard to store, hard to interact with. Like
Correct.
Similar challenges.
Very similar. Yeah. So I just bringing up that idea that, we all want to care for people, right? Like some of the human tendencies are the same. And technology will not necessarily solve the problems. There are actually human challenges that we have. So actually I want to go, you have so much interesting experience, Amy, working in the US and working abroad. And I think for a lot of our audience, I think they'd love to work and have all that broad experience. How did you come to have all those such diverse experience? Like, how did you manage that in your field? I mean, in your position?
Yeah, I think I knew I really wanted to use design as a way to change how people interact with parts of the world. And I saw that there's a lot of unnecessary complexity in our everyday lives. And that is often felt by the most marginalized populations or underserved populations to navigate those. And so I think ever since the beginning of my career, I have really dedicated and looked for opportunities to find a way in to be doing that work. So, when I first started my career, it was actually in a financial services company, not at all related to a lot of this work.
No, but I love that you're saying that, Amy, because that's great. People need to hear that. Like you can start. Too many people think it's linear, right? You start where you are today and you got where you are. No, you started way off in financial services in a very different space.
In financial services, in a marketing department. But what was interesting about that at the time was it was 2008. So we'd had one of the greatest market crashes of our history.
Right.
In financial services, the whole industry was being blown up essentially in terms of, and highly criticized. And a lot of those were frankly bad design. And so I was one of the only designers at the company, and I was like, well, I still really want to do the social impact work. I want the work I do to drive more clarity for people. And so I was able to sort of identify projects in that space where information design was really critical. I was trying to help teams explain financial offerings, essentially. And so that was a close proximity to like the type of work I want to do, but I just leaned into that and then got known for that. And then I was able to use that to help me find other jobs and projects that I wanted to work on. And I was also volunteering at the time for some social impact organizations like Epic, Engaging Philanthropy, Inspiring Creatives, and just looking for my community of people that I could start to break into that work.
Yeah. I think that's a great piece of advice is volunteering can be a great door to opportunities, which is a great transition, I think, to my next question, which is, what's a surprising thing that you've learned in your journey so far? Maybe a career-defining moment or maybe a failure. I find one thing that people want to know is often the people I interview sound perfect, like yourself. Everything went so smoothly for you. So this is also an invitation, should you want, to share something that didn't go so well for you.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it's such a good question. I was actually thinking about it earlier when you were talking about being able to sort of realize and work on these projects. What does it take to get to do that? And the thing that was coming up for me that I think has been surprising is that, and I said this already, but design is really in everything. And so I think a lot of times we think about the design being in the artifact that we're delivering, like in those paper-based forms that I was describing before. But it's really so much more than that. It's in who is the minister of health or the organization that's going to sponsor this to get it through. What's the change management involved? Who are the other stakeholders? And I think being in, for example, earlier in my career in innovation consulting, we were always like, oh, we'd work so hard. We had this amazing product or service we'd recommend on a slide deck at the end of the work and be like, you should go and build this. It's rooted in user needs. And then honestly, more than half the time, nothing would happen from that work. It would just sort of end up in a file folder somewhere on somebody's computer. And it wasn't until I had the opportunity at Salesforce to launch a program out of a consulting project that I had done. So I was consulting with a group of nonprofit education organizations at Salesforce with Salesforce leadership and made a recommendation like I would as a consultant for what they should do to solve a need in the market. And then they said, hey, we're going to do this. Do you want to come lead it? And I was like, yeah, that's amazing. Right? I haven't actually gone to implement an idea. This is actually pre the work I'm doing now. So a previous version of it. And it was so enlightening for me to see like, wow, that idea was really good at that moment in time for maybe like a year. And then the way the business runs, it's just constantly changing, new stakeholders, new organizational structures, new priorities, like it wasn't working anymore. And it was like, this actually is the biggest aha, is like to make something really successful, it's not like a one and done, it's continuous and it needs multiple people to buy in and has many different facets to it than the thing itself that you are designing.
Oh, that's interesting. So continual iteration is the takeaway, or like constant refinement? What would you...
Like being adaptable, continuing to iterate, thinking strategically about all the influences, internal and external, that might be putting pressure or changing the dynamic of the thing that you are working on, and designing. All of that influences whether it's a product, a service, anything is ultimately going to be successful.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah, that's so true, especially now. I'm going to ask you in a moment about your work with AI, but I think that's exceptionally true, that the rate of change. But first, I want to drill down a little more on your something you said earlier about you're working in financial services and you're trying to figure out how to make social impact. I think looking from the outside on your career, some would say you've been incredibly creative about how to make social impact from the inside out. I think some people would say, right? You've worked with You've been very creative. And I think some people feel like they have to work for a nonprofit to make social impact. And I'd love to hear your take on where and how you make social impact in design.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a good question. And I know this is something we often talk a lot about as a corporate philanthropy or being part of a corporate philanthropy within Salesforce. Part of what's amazing about what we can do at Salesforce is that we have resources and a platform to be able to amplify and support an amazing ecosystem of nonprofits and schools and innovators all around us. And so you're always towing the line of by helping and sort of understanding how to navigate the business, that allows me to then bring more resources to the communities I'm serving and not seeing them as two entirely separate entities, but rather kind of a group of organizations that have to work together and to be complementary and supportive of each other. So I think that's how I've looked at my career and sort of the areas I've navigated in, and how am I leveraging what I know how to do, what the resources are at my disposal to be able to support those around me in whatever way I can.
Yeah.
And that can look different for everyone.
Yeah, it's really a systems point of view, right? At the end of the day, like you look at the big system, right? For-profits, nonprofits, everything is a big system rather than a silo. I mean, it's going back to this idea of we can look at things in silos, or we can look at the big system. Everybody's working together in this world, and how do they work together? And understanding the bigger picture, I think, ultimately helps you be more fluid and do the work you want to do, rather than get stuck in a single silo. I appreciate that. Okay, so I got to see you at a conference called Design and AI. And I'm wondering if you gave a great, kind of shared a great insight there. I'm wondering if you would share a little bit about some of the excitement and future you see about the evolving role of AI in areas of social impact, perhaps education, climate justice, some of the high level themes you're seeing in projects that you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, I am really feeling very optimistic about what we could see in the future. And that's not to say that there aren't risks that we have to continue to mitigate and understand. So in our work, and in my work right now with the Salesforce Accelerator in Agents for Impact, we are specifically working with nonprofits and schools to help them be able to leverage and build capacity for AI to adopt and have an impact on their own mission and how they drive delivery. And I'm really proud we've done, I'll just say quickly, 10 million, a little over 10 million so far to nonprofits in just a few years. We started this program right at the height of ChatGPT, recognizing that AI is going to change the world as we know it. And we don't want our social sector and our community, most vulnerable communities, to be the ones that get left behind in this, as they so often are when we have major technical digital revolutions. And so a couple of examples I would say that I'm personally feeling just really excited about and grateful to be part of in their journeys. So one is with an organization called Good 360. They route donated goods to communities and community-based organizations in need. So they are getting, for example, 16,000 truckloads of goods a year that they are redistributing out to communities, and often in the wake of a disaster. So think after the wildfires in LA, they're going and helping, making sure there's building materials and furniture so people can restore and rebuild their lives. They are using AI now to help them deliver those goods more effectively. So they anticipate seeing 3 times the delivery rate and impact, which means that they're going to serve 15 million more people. They already do $3 billion worth of goods a year, and that'll go up to about 4 billion they expect in about a year from using AI. They have a small team doing this, so it's just amazing to see the type of impact they're able to unlock and the efficiencies gained, because everyone at the end of the day who works for a nonprofit wants to see their communities being served more effectively and supported. And I remember one of the people we were working with over there, she was like, we all came into this work to serve our communities, and so much of it is spent behind a computer, spent behind doing processing paperwork. That's not what we want to do. That's not why we entered this space. And so they are feeling optimistic about the way in which technology can actually help free humans up for the work that they feel most strongly about and what really sort of resonates with their hearts.
Amy, I'm doing a lot right now on AI and coaching, and I'm seeing the same thing. People are saying, "Oh, and with teachers as well, if like AI can do some of the grunt work that nobody got into teaching to to do the grunt work. They got into it because they want the face to face with the students, they want the face to face. So I agree with you. I think it's really beautiful, and I agree with you too. I appreciate at the beginning that you said there are risks, right? Like there is a risk that we could just end up doing more screen time, right? So we have to be mindful and put in guardrails. But I really appreciate your story of like how can we outsource some of this work? Absolutely. That's a beautiful story. Thank you. Great example. Any other examples you're particularly excited about?
I was just going to share, you were mentioning teaching, so I was going to share something else. I think similarly, as you probably know, burnout can be really high, especially in fields of like tutoring or case management in the nonprofit sector, and a lot of that is due to some of the traumatic stories that one might hear in those fields, and also the burden of the paperwork, frankly, that they have to fill out to be able to do that work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's just so much potential there. We actually did work with an organization called College Possible in one of our first cohorts, and they support first-generation students in getting to and through post-secondary, and they were switching to a really AI-first operating model, recognizing that they would hire or use AmeriCorps volunteer and near-peer coaches to support their programs and their students. And those near peers were often really new into the workforce themselves, needed to get up to speed on, potentially 6 years of experience with these students because they had been in the program for that long.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of information and a lot of responsibility for somebody who's also new into the workforce. At the same time, there have been tremendous budget cuts and disruptions into the social sector this year. And so they are now actually really thankful and appreciative of moving into a more AI-centered work, because they're going to use AI to help their coaches be able to summarize things like case records, enter some of the information, keep track and flag risk points for their students that will allow them to maintain their operations and continue to scale their operations, even facing budget cuts and crisis. And so I think there's a lot of potential to think really critically about humans and how humans and AI can work together so that can really, again, free up humans for the work that they need to do in order to be successfully serving those that they're trying to support.
That is so cool. And this is all the program a later iteration of the program you pitched as a consultant to Salesforce years ago. Is this correct?
Mm-hmm.
How wonderful. How proud you must be. Congratulations. That is a wonderful success story.
Thank you.
I look forward to watching all the successes to come out of this. This is such wonderful work. Well, you have a long career ahead of you, and I'm curious and you seem like a lifelong learner. So what do you still want to learn or do?
Oh, there's so much. Sometimes I'm like, maybe I should go back to school and have an entirely different career.
Okay,
and
what would it be?
A lot of different potential things.
What would it be? Tell me a few. What would it be?
Okay, at one point, I think I was like, I should go back to school for public health. I think that would be really interesting. I've always been really interested in healthcare. And I've been like, what if I was like more of a frontline healthcare worker, really having some of that patient-to-patient interaction? Like maybe that would be an interesting work. Then I felt like AI is really fascinating. Maybe I should like really go deep into like some of the technologies behind it. Right now, I would say my like current thing is I just want to geek out about the potential of the technology. I think there's so much the AI, like generative AI tools can do that are fascinating. I was just using it, for example, the other day I wanted to do a little bit more rigor and intentionality around a mindfulness practice. And so I opened up ChatGPT and was like, can you help me like reflect on some positive moments of my day? And it was just so great. And then I got, it sort of like reiterated back to me some of the things that I should be thinking more, or reframing how I was thinking about some of my moments of my day. And I just appreciated some of those insights of where the technology could take us.
Oh, that's really beautiful. I love that. Thank you very much for sharing that. That's beautiful. my final question is, what is one unexpected piece of advice do you have for those entering your field?
Yeah, that's it's a great question. I think so. Depends on which way you're coming from, I guess.
Okay.
If I think about you coming from more of a technology background, which is not the background I came from, I think don't just fall in love with the shiny tool. Like really think about the problem that you're trying to solve. I think that's probably hammered pretty well into any technologist these days. But just in case
Yeah.
it's not, that would be my tip. And then for the designers, I think that is so ingrained in how we work. Start with the problem, think about the humans and the systems that you're working with, and really think about the ways in which your work might be putting influence on those, and keep them at the center of anything you're trying to solve. That I've actually found myself, as I've moved a little further and further away from like straight up design, what I would call like straight up design work, into more systems thinking, leadership. It's really easy to forget when you're not around a bunch of other designers all the time that not everybody thinks like that. So remember that is a very valuable framing to keep. Like, why are we doing this? What is the problem we're trying to solve?
Yeah.
And don't take it for granted that people might not have thought it all the way through, or might not be clear or aligned on it. And so I think don't forget that your superpower is exactly that, being a problem first thinker.
Oh, I love that. It's beautiful. Is there anything I haven't asked you, or any story you've been dying to share that has come up in your mind, Amy, that I haven't prompted you to share?
That's a great question. The only one I will share, and that I think I shared this when we were at that panel that you saw me at, that I often think about because it was a really aha moment for me on the role technology can play in some of these sticky and complex social interactions. We were doing some work, this is a few years ago, around equity in education, supporting students getting to and through college. And we were figuring out what role would technology play? Where could we be supportive with technology? Where is it, not a right tech fit? And the issues around financial aid continued to come up. And I remember, and so we ended up down a path. What we were co-designing with a bunch of organizations focused on this work, experts in the field, students themselves who were experiencing these issues and challenges. And we ended up focusing in financial aid. And I remember sitting in for a user interview. We were doing some prototype testing with an individual who was testing this prototype around being able to apply for financial aid through FAFSA, specifically our federal aid program. And she was like, "Oh, this is really helpful. Like, I'm getting a lot of questions answered around how to fill out the FAFSA form." I was like, "Oh, say more. Like, what's helpful about this? What did you do?" And she was like, "Well, I remember when I was filling this out, I almost didn't end up going to college because I got to the question on the form that said, 'What is your permanent address?' And she's like, and I didn't know how to fill it out." And I was like, "Say more, like, what do you mean?" And she's like, "Well, I was moving around. I didn't have, a stable home life at the time. I didn't really have a permanent address to put in. And I didn't know who to ask. I didn't have an adult helping me. I was kind of embarrassed about my situation. And I didn't know what to do. So I almost just completely stopped the application."
Yep.
17-year-old at the time, just completely stopped. And we're like, oh my gosh, like, tell me more about what this tool does. She's like, "Well, I can ask somebody anonymously. I don't feel embarrassed by it. And I can get an answer that will help me fill this out and still keep me on the right path." And I think that goes against a lot of what I think we think, that like people need to have a human interaction for that moment, when actually like there's also challenges with human interactions. Like, they're only available certain times. You might not have a personal relationship. That could be fearful and stressful if you haven't had good human interactions in the past. And so that was just a moment for me that like really highlighted, it's not there are places and times when humans are better, and there are places and times when maybe a technology system is a better way to get the answer.
How that's a great, the channel of information is important. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your time with us, Amy. And thank you to our listeners for listening to the Technical Difficulties podcast, produced by the Center for Human-Computer Interaction and Design. and the McCormick School of Engineering at Northwestern University. That was Amy Guterman, and you can find out more about her in the show notes. You can learn more about the show by going to technicaldifficultiespodcast.com. Drop us a note at technicaldifficultiesteam@gmail.com or leave us a review on your favorite podcast app.